debate. Back to immigration, and Congressman DeSantis, a question for you. There are 850,000 illegal immigrants living in the state of Florida. That's more than 6% of the labor force here. Would you deport all 850,000 of those people?
Well, as governor, I'm not going to have that authority. That's going to be something that the federal government's going to do. But here's what I will do. There is not going to be any sanctuary cities in the state of Florida if I'm governor. And if there's a local official and it falls in the category where the governor can do this, any official engaging in that sanctuary behavior, I will remove them from their position if I'm allowed to.
But Congressman,
so here's the thing. But here's the thing we have to decide. Do you want to do another amnesty, which is what a lot of people want to do? Obviously, Adam was in favor of the Obama-Schumer amnesty, which I think was not good. Here's the problem with the amnesty. It sends a signal to people to come illegally. It's a slap in the face to the people who come legally. Florida has one of the most vibrant populations of legal immigrants. Why aren't we talking about them and their families and their kids? They're contributing a lot to our society. So yes, at the end of the day, well, the labor force is another thing. I actually think we should have a legal workforce. Okay. I believe in E-Verify. I know that Adam and I are different on that. But if you actually had a legal workforce, a lot of these problems would not be here in 5 or 10 years.
So are you saying that you would convert them through some sort of path to citizenship? Because you've got 47,000
Of course not. I'm saying just the opposite. I'm opposed. I oppose the Schumer-Obama amnesty.
But you have farmers who need those workers in Florida.
Here's the thing, though. That is not an excuse to let lawlessness prevail in the Sunshine State. I'm sorry. It's not a valid excuse. And we can make a decision. Do you want to shut off the main magnet? And if you do that, we will have huge contributions from legal immigrants and people who come from elsewhere, even within our own country.
So
but you won't have the incentive to come illegally.
What happens to the 850,000 here illegally? What happens to them?
Well, if you're here illegally under an E-Verify system, I don't think you should be able to take a job that an American may want to have. That has a downward pressure on wages. It's not what President Trump campaigned on, and it's not something that I've ever supported. So I've always been opposed to amnesty, and in fact, I've been supportive of doing things like E-Verify, a border wall, and ending chain migration and the diversity visa lottery. That's the direction we should go federally.
Commissioner, you were mentioned there. Do you want to respond at all?
That is the direction you should go in Washington. Washington should do its job. They haven't passed an immigration bill. Employers in Florida need and must have a stable, legal workforce with no path to citizenship, but you have to have an immigration fix that meets the needs of this economy. Governor Scott dealt with E-Verify with his executive order for anybody who does business with the state. That is the kind of leadership that Governor Scott has performed here in Florida. That's what Florida First leadership looks like. Washington is not going to solve our problems. We need someone who knows Florida best, will put Florida first, and keep our economy moving in the right direction. The Democrats, they don't just want sanctuary cities. They're calling for Florida to be a sanctuary state. That's the stakes of this election. Places like Maryland and places in California even allow people who are here illegally to vote. Not on our watch, not in the Sunshine State.
Governor Scott signed the executive order for the workforce. He would have been able to sign E-Verify legislation if Adam hadn't worked to kill E-Verify. And it's not all Washington. We can do things like E-Verify here in Florida. And if I'm governor, I will absolutely pursue that course of action. I'm proud to be endorsed by President Trump. He said I'm strong on borders, and I think that's a big reason why he supported me.
We're moving on to the next topic. As we mentioned, breaking just a few hours ago, yet another deadly shooting, this time at the newsroom of the Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland. Right now, we have reports of 5 people being killed, and it's obviously an all too familiar story that's played out in Parkland, Florida, several months ago. The shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shook the nation to its core and again thrust this issue of gun control and the Second Amendment rights into the political spotlight. Phil Keating has more.
Guns in Florida have historically been the best of friends. A pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment state where Republicans control all branches of government. It's where the Stand Your Ground law became infamous.
There's a shooter at the school.
But on Valentine's Day this year, Parkland happened. the deadliest high school shooting in the country's history with 17 dead. And that came on the heels of Orlando's Pulse nightclub massacre with 50 dead, both triggering a surge in calls for stricter gun control. This March, Republican Governor Rick Scott bucked the NRA, raising the age to buy rifles to 21, while also giving school districts the option to arm teachers in schools, which the largest have refused.
Enough is enough!
Since then, Parkland students and parents who stormed Tallahassee after the shooting, demanding action, are now registering young voters, urging them to vote against any lawmaker who takes money from the gun lobby.
Now, that's going to put Republicans in a tough spot because these activists are making a lot of noise. So they're going after any candidate that's taking money from the NRA, and that's typically Republicans.
Right after Parkland, Florida Atlantic University polled Floridians and found 70% support stricter gun laws, and Quinnipiac University found 62% support an assault rifle ban. As for young voters, 18 to 24 has the lowest turnout of any age bracket. Brett and Martha?
Phil, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Putnam, you once bragged about being a proud NRA sellout. Do you still describe yourself that way?
I'm a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a proud supporter of our constitutional liberties. And I think it's important. I believe that it is important that we not let the left hijack this debate and try to lump law-abiding, Constitution-loving, responsible, and safe gun owners with the monster who shot up Parkland and the terrorist-inspired individual who shot up the Pulse nightclub. Do not let them conflate it. Don't let them bully or coerce Florida businesses and Florida brands. We cannot allow them to say to our American citizens that you are going to lose all of your Second Amendment rights because of what mentally unstable individuals and those who are inspired by terrorists have done to soft targets. In Florida, there are more than 2 million law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment rights through CWPs. And crime in Florida is at a 47-year low. It is critically important that we defend our rights and protect our students in the schools. Those two things are not incompatible.
Congressman DeSantis, in the wake of the Parkland shooting, Congressman, as you heard in Phil's piece, Florida voters overwhelmingly supported some tightening of gun laws. But when Governor Rick Scott, also a staunch defender of the Second Amendment, signed that law, you said at the time you would have vetoed it. Does that make you out of step with a large majority of Florida voters?
Not at all, Brett. Here, my wife and I have 2 young kids under 2. They're the pride of our lives, and the thought that some animal would come and shoot them fills me with rage and the sorrow that those parents must feel. I cannot even imagine it. But here's the thing. It wasn't because of the Second Amendment that happened. It was because an utter failure of both the locals and in the FBI. And if I had been governor, I would not have signed gun control. But what I would have done is I would have removed that sheriff from Broward County. He failed his citizens, and he should have been removed. The other thing I would say is you have people in the FBI that got 2 phone calls about this monster. First one they log, they don't do anything about it. They get another one, not just saying he's bad or dangerous, but that he's likely to attack a school. They put 2 and 2 together, and what did they decide to do? Nothing. They just went out for lunch. And yet, who at the FBI has been fired for that? The lack of accountability is what puts our people at risk. Those FBI officials should have been fired the next day.
Commissioner, would you have fired Sheriff Israel? Would you have fired Sheriff Israel?
Sheriff Israel is under investigation, and Sheriff Israel needs to go. The promise, and I'll tell you something else. The superintendent who implemented a promise program that broke promises to those students has put all of our students at risk. That individual was expelled for a weapons violation. Local law enforcement made 36 visits to their home. Department of Children and Families visited the home because he posted on YouTube videos, "I want to be a professional shooter." At every silo of government, those children were let down. They were failed, and that cannot happen again in Florida.
But, Commissioner, so Some have suggested that even a silo of government that you overwatched had some blame, because the background check system, the computer system that you oversaw, was down for a full year, and during that period, the Pulse shooting occurred. How do you account for that?
I account for it this way. I was the first regulator in the country who put those concealed weapons licenses through 3 databases. 2 are criminal background checks. The third is for non-criminal offenses, drugs, mental illness, immigration issues, dishonorable discharges from the military. Nobody in the country did that until I did it. And when I learned that we had an employee who was not doing their job, I held that employee accountable. And keep in mind also that you're talking about something that they never put public safety at risk, because that same database prevented them from purchasing a firearm at the point of sale. So Floridians are safe. The individual who let us down is no longer with my department, and I held people accountable. That's what leaders do when you're leading an agency. You discover the problem, you investigate the problem, and you hold people accountable. That's what Rick Scott has done for Florida, and that's what I will do as governor of Florida.
The problem with that answer, though, is that he didn't act like a leader because he covered it up. It was discovered by the media. He didn't tell Governor Scott. In fact, when Governor Scott found out about it, he said it was very disturbing. No one had told him. So if you're a leader, I know if he had told Governor Scott would have come out publicly. He would have said, we had this problem. Here's what happened. We had to find this out based on news reports. And so that's a different type of leadership. I believe in transparent leadership. Yes, there's going to be things that happen in an agency. You got to hold people accountable. But then you have to level with your constituents and be honest about what happened and not try to cover it up.
Commissioner?
I held people accountable, and I held myself accountable. I went before the press, and I answered questions until they ran out of questions. We have put safeguards in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And keep in mind that the real issue here is that there are people on the left who want to take away your guns, who want to undermine the Second Amendment while making Florida a sanctuary state. Leaders are unafraid to hold people accountable. Leaders admit when you have a breakdown in your process, and you fix it, and you move on, and you make Florida a stronger, better place. Law enforcement has weighed our 2 backgrounds and has weighed our 2 records. And law enforcement is firmly in my camp, because they know, those 45 sheriffs know, that I will be the best governor to keep Floridians safe, to protect your liberties, to eliminate the gang activities, to crack down on the opioid crisis, and to protect our constitutional rights in the process. That's what this is all about.
I want to turn topics now to the issue of trade. Congressman, a June study on trade estimates that Florida could lose nearly 25,000 jobs as a result of the steel and aluminum tariffs. The European Union just announced retaliatory tariffs targeting goods such as orange juice at 25%. So is President Trump's trade policy good for Florida?
International trade is a very important component of Florida's economy. I've been supportive in the Congress of getting more funding for some of our ports, like in Jacksonville, because I think that really can be an economic driver. But here's the thing you have to understand. Donald Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. He knows how to negotiate, and I've talked to him about this. He does not want to see an end state where we have high tariffs across the board. But he also looks around the country and says, we have other countries that bring goods, sell goods to us, and we don't really charge much of a tariff, and yet we can't sell some of our products to there. So he's looking at that imbalance and saying he wants to do something about it. So if his negotiating isn't working in this way, I think he'll try something else. But this is not the direction he's going to say we want high tariffs writ large. He's trying to get concessions on behalf of the American people, and I think we should give him a chance to do his thing. He's a master negotiator.
Even if it's painful on the short end. in the short term?
Well, look, I hope that the tariffs, I hope we get concessions soon and can go back. I want to see lower tariffs across the board eventually, but I also think if you look at what like China has done, they steal our intellectual property, they cheat on these deals, and we're just going to act like, it's hunky-dory. And Donald Trump's credit, nobody else was really willing to talk about that until he came on the scene. And he's leading with purpose and with conviction on this. So I want to see Florida with international trade across all our great ports, but I also want to have fair deals for the American people, and I think that's what President Trump is trying to do.
Along the same lines, Commissioner Putnam, the president announced these tariffs on steel and aluminum. You seem to echo his tough talk on trade. You talked about the Mexican strawberry growers having an advantage over the U.S. Farmers. But now, as we say, China is starting to retaliate with tariffs and target some of the other things. Exports for American farmers are impacted here. So as Florida's top agricultural official, do you support or oppose this trade war?
As Florida's top agricultural official, I've had a front row seat to the trade war that began 20-plus years ago when the United States signed a bad deal that has put Florida farmers and Florida ranchers at a distinct disadvantage and put them out of business. I have seen this up close and personal. The hand-wringing that's been going on about a trade war. China's been in a trade war against the United States for decades, as has Mexico. They devalue their currency. They steal our technologies. I have seen, go back to Ruskin, as I was saying earlier, I care more about the jobs in Ruskin than what's going on in Russia. Ruskin doesn't look the same because we were on the losing end of a bad trade deal that hasn't even been enforced to the extent that America had any kind of leverage at all. President Trump's the first president who cared more about American jobs and Florida farmers than about the Swiss diplomats at their tea parties. He's fighting for us, and I am excited to see finally a president take on the trade wars that will benefit American workers, Florida businesses, and Florida farmers.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Now moving on to the issue of entitlements. Commissioner Putnam, staying with you on this one. You lambasted Governor Rick Scott for expanding Medicaid because it costs too much. Democrats will undoubtedly use your record on entitlements against you this fall. What would you say to almost a quarter of Floridians who depend on those programs for their health care?
There's no doubt in my mind that the Democrats are going to talk about expanding government, that they're going to talk about a government-run health care program, and they're going to talk about how many ways to raise your taxes to pay for it. I'm against the expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare because Obamacare is a bad deal for Floridians. There are over 40 counties in Florida who only have one insurance provider. How's Obamacare working out for you? Health care costs in Florida are 42% of the budget. Medicaid is 1/3 of the budget. Now, it is the Pac-Man gobbling up the state budget, more than education, more than infrastructure, more than natural resources. And so it was the right decision. Nobody aspires to be on Medicaid. We're going to create an economy where they have higher paying jobs, where they have great economic opportunities and good careers. That's a Republican plan for strengthening our economy and getting people access to affordable, high-quality health care in Florida.
Let me ask you, very quickly, if you can. A lot of states are implementing programs of work for Medicaid, and you just mentioned how Medicaid is gobbling up funding in Florida. Do you support work for Medicaid? Would you do that in Florida?
Absolutely. If you're going to be on public assistance, we're all able-bodied individuals. Let's be clear. Able-bodied individuals who are on public assistance ought to work.
Okay, gentlemen, stand by. When we come back, other questions. Should Puerto Rico become the 51st state? That plus closing statements from the candidates as the debate continues here in Orlando. Welcome back to Orlando. Now we're going to start the lightning round. quick answers here from each candidate, 30 seconds each, please.
All right, so right now, Congressman DeSantis, outside this venue, there is a group of Puerto Rican evacuees protesting the Republican response to Hurricane Maria. Puerto Ricans now outnumber Cuban Americans in the state of Florida. They could swing this election. So how do you convince them to vote for a Republican?
The Congresswoman from Puerto Rico, Jennifer Gonzalez, is a Republican, and she's endorsed me for governor here in Florida. And we are going to be taking the case to the Puerto Rican community because you know what? They serve in our military more than almost any other group. They care about education. They work as hard as anybody. And so they're natural Republicans. We just have to take a good, solid, conservative message. Don't water it down. And Jennifer and me will be there alongside Governor Scott. And we will do very well here in Central Florida with our Puerto Rican friends.
Commissioner Putnam, 30 seconds. They feel that Republicans let them down after the hurricane.
Well, anyone who came to Florida, most especially here in Osceola County, Florida, knows that we rolled out the welcome mat for our friends and fellow Americans from Puerto Rico. We all know what it's like to live through hurricanes. We welcomed them into our schools. We provided housing. We provided opportunities to get their lives back to normal. Florida is a great neighbor to our neighbors in Puerto Rico and will continue to be. They care about small businesses. They care about faith. They care about family. And that's why they're going to support conservatives, and that's why they
believe that states know what's best for their states. And I don't want the federal government dictating every policy. I am not in favor in Florida of doing recreational marijuana because I remember in high school that was the #1 reason why some of the people I went to school with ended up falling out and didn't do good in school, didn't do good in sports. So I think that there's a lot of problems with that, but I am supporter the fact that Florida has made a decision and the voters made a decision about the medical marijuana. I want it implemented, but I don't want the federal government coming in and then prosecuting people who are just acting consistent with state law.
Commissioner, quickly, what would you do?
70% of Floridians supported medical marijuana. It needs to be faithfully implemented. But as a dad, as an employer, I don't want Florida to jeopardize our family-friendly image and be more like California by legalizing recreational marijuana. It's bad for Florida. It's bad for families. It's not who we want to be. Here we are in the most family-friendly destination on earth. That's not who we want to be. We're better than that. Enforce medical, but don't go down the path of the legalization of recreational marijuana.
All right. Gentlemen, each candidate will now have time for a brief closing statement, and we begin with Congressman DeSantis.
Thanks, Fox. And let me thank my wife, Casey, who's there. She's the best wife and mother anyone could have, and I love her. And I thank God that she married me. Look, I'm an Iraq veteran. I am a principled and proven conservative, and I am endorsed by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to be governor of the state of Florida. And I think we have a great opportunity to build off the success that Governor Scott had by expanding economic growth and job opportunities, reforming our education system, including opposing Common Core, and then appointing conservative justices to the state Supreme Court. But we're not going to get that done if we let the insiders in Tallahassee choose the next candidate and go back to the days like it was with Charlie Crist when all the good old boys ran the show. I am ready to lead on day one. I ask for your support and I ask for your vote. Thank you and God bless you.
Commissioner Putnam, your 30 seconds.
We are blessed to live in a state that people dream about visiting for just a few days. We live in a state people spend much of their adult lives trying to get here because Florida for them is a prize, a reward for a life well lived, in many cases someplace else. The governor of Florida is also a prize, but you must be present to win. I'm a farmer. I'm a small business owner. I know our state best, and I will always put Florida first.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight. That is it for us, but the night is just beginning. I'll be back next with the story.
Thanks for joining us, and good night from Orlando. Thank you to this great crowd tonight. Thank you, gentlemen.
So this is a Fox News alert. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum, live tonight from Orlando, where moments ago we wrapped up the Florida Republican gubernatorial debate. But we also, of course, have been monitoring this tragic situation that is unfolding this evening in Maryland. Hours ago, a gunman opened fire at the Capital Gazette newspaper in Annapolis, killing 5 people and wounding several others. This is a live look at the scene right now. We do expect authorities will be giving us another update in about a half an hour from now. We will take you live to that. As of right now, we know very little about this suspect. We do know that he is in custody. He is being questioned. He is a white male, and we are told that he has not been cooperative with investigators thus far. Meanwhile, witnesses describing this scene as chaotic. They say that people were diving underneath their desks as the shots rang out. Video also capturing dozens of people as they were running out of the building, their hands held high. We have seen these scenes too many times in America, and this is the response, according to what was seen in terms of the police and their action. Watch.
The shooter is in our custody and being interrogated as we speak. I want to acknowledge the tremendous work of our public safety professionals today. They were on the scene in about 60 seconds, but beyond that, they went immediately into that building without a moment's hesitation and demonstrated incredible courage.
So Trace Gallagher has been reporting on this since it happened, and he joins us live from our West Coast newsroom with more this evening. Trace.
Martha, the Associated Press is now reporting that police have finally identified the shooter, though they are not releasing his name, and there are conflicting reports about his age. Some say he's mid-20s. NBC is reporting he is 39 and was ID'd using facial recognition software. It took a while because he wasn't carrying identification, would not cooperate with police, and had damaged his fingers, making it difficult to get prints. But having his name now gives police access to his records and social media footprint, potentially opening the door to a possible motive. Police say the man walked into the Capital Gazette, shot through the glass door, and then began shooting at employees. Capitol crime reporter Phil Davis tweeted, quoting, "There is nothing more terrifying than hearing multiple people get shot while you are under your desk and then hear the gunman reload." Davis went on to give an interview to the Baltimore Sun, the parent company of the Capital Gazette, where he said, quoting again, "I'm a police reporter. I write about this stuff, not necessarily to this extent, but shootings and death all the time. But as much as I'm going to try to articulate how traumatizing it is to be hiding under your desk, you don't know until you're there and you feel helpless," ending with, quote, "I don't know why he stopped," meaning he stopped shooting. We do know that police arrived within 60 seconds and there was no exchange of gunfire with the suspect. But the shooter was reportedly carrying fake grenades, smoke bombs, and flashbang devices. And here's what police said about an explosive found on site. Watch.
We did recover what we thought may have been an explosive device. That has been taken care of. We have members of the bomb squad on scene. We don't anticipate having any more explosive devices.
Unclear if the fake grenade or flashbang is what police are referring to when they say explosive device. The Capital Gazette is among the nation's oldest newspapers, dating back to the mid-1800s. An editor at the paper released a statement about the employees that reads in part, quote, "We keep doing more with less. We find ways to cover high school sports, breaking news, tax hikes, school budgets, and local entertainment. We are there in times of tragedy. We do our best to share the stories of people, those who make our community better. Please understand we do all this to serve our community." He also requested no interviews. President Trump has been kept abreast of the news, tweeting, quote, "My thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. Thank you to all of the first responders who are currently on scene." Meantime, 3 people remain in local hospitals, and the county coroner and investigators remain on scene trying to piece this crime together. We have heard very little from other employees inside the Capitol headquarters. It was an intern who initially tweeted, "Active shooter, please help us." Martha.
Awesome. Awful. Trace, thank you very much. More as we get it throughout the course of the evening. So now to our other top story of the night, some fireworks on Capitol Hill as lawmakers demanded answers from the top officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice. FBI Director Christopher Wray and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein fielded a series of pointed and fiery questions from House Republicans today, trying to get to the bottom of how their agencies handled the Clinton email investigation, and then subsequently the Russia probe that they began. Watch this.
I am the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Okay?
You're the boss, Mr. Rosenstein.
That's correct.
Why'd you tell Peter Strzok not to answer our questions yesterday?
But I didn't give Peter Strzok any instructions.
Horowitz said his bias is an appropriate explanation for his conduct. Do you agree?
I certainly agree with the findings of the Inspector General report, and I think those messages clearly do indicate bias.
We need a date when you found out that the wife of your deputy was working for people who are actively trying to undermine President Trump.
If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart.
Here now, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, among those demanding answers in that hearing today. Congressman, good to see you here in Florida.
Good to see you.
So I watched as much as I could this morning before we started getting ready for the debate of this hearing, and it was pretty heated in there. What do you think was accomplished today?
We learned that Rod Rosenstein won't tell us whether or not he even read the FISA application that resulted in spying on officials associated with the Trump campaign. And I think there's a real transition that occurred today. This is going from just being Robert Mueller's probe to a probe that Rod Rosenstein is responsible for, because he's ultimately who appointed Mueller. And so the staffing decisions that demonstrate bias, the accountability, kind of the cleanup of people like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page should fall to Rosenstein. And we didn't get the answers we wanted today.
Let's take a listen to Representative Jordan. He's pressing Rosenstein over the releasing of documents, which I know has been top of mind for all of you. Watch this part.
The House of Representatives is going to go on record saying you haven't complied with requests from a separate and equal branch of government, that you haven't complied with subpoenas, and you got 7 days to get your act together. And I want to know why you won't give us what we've asked for.
Sir, I certainly hope that your colleagues are not under that impression. That is not accurate, sir. And
it is accurate. We have caught you hiding
Mr.
information,
Chairman, can we allow the witness to answer?
I mean, how do you square that?
Well, there have been a number of circumstances where we found documents that were responsive to the requests from Congress, but they weren't produced to us. So that was deeply troubling. Also, I think you've seen Mr. Jordan's frustration bubble beyond just a small group of members on the Judiciary Committee to now the entire House of Representatives taking a vote, and virtually every Republican saying we do have a role for oversight. Rod Rosenstein has frustrated that oversight, and we want the documents in 7 days.
I mean, at the heart of what you are digging for is whether or not there was a political agenda in place to try to disrupt the Trump campaign, and whether or not some of these agents, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, took it upon themselves to try to instigate or set a pretext for investigating the Trump campaign. Did you get any further down that road today?
I think both today and yesterday, particularly where we got the chance for the first time to interview Peter Strzok, we learned a lot more about the ways in which the bias not only existed, but it actually manifested in investigative decisions. The Inspector General, a Democrat appointed by Barack Obama, even said that he could not rule out bias as the reason why the Hillary Clinton investigation was pushed aside and the Donald Trump Russia investigation was elevated beyond what the facts would have called for.
Yeah, so the main question is whether or not these agents tried to figure out a way to sort of poke holes in the campaign, the Trump campaign, to kind of put feelers out there and see if they put out that bait, would anybody bite? Would they say, you know, oh, sure, I'd love to hear some dirt on Hillary Clinton, and that possibly it's even been suggested that they would then be entrapped in a situation where it appeared that they were doing something wrong. Is that what you believe happened?
That's what the documents will show. Today, when I asked Rod Rosenstein if there was any intelligence collected on the Trump campaign before the George Papadopoulos report, he would not answer that question. Now, if the answer was no, he could have clearly said no. Instead, he said it's classified, which seems to suggest there's information there. There was intelligence collected on the Trump campaign, and that would indicate whether or not this was entrapment or baiting of some kind for political purposes.
So what do you do next to get the answers to those questions?
The question is whether or not our leadership, now having heard from the entire House of Representatives on this question, will say either the documents show up or we start the impeachment proceedings of Rod Rosenstein.
And what about the president? Is there more that he could do?
Well, you know, the president's in an awkward position here because I think the bias is reflected against him. The president could declassify documents from before the Papadopoulos report, and that would tell us whether or not there was spying or intelligence collection on the Trump campaign, and I've encouraged the president to do that.
We saw Trey Gowdy encouraging them to come to some conclusion or to present evidence if they have it. What is your sense of the Mueller time frame right now?
Well, we don't know it, and that's what's so troubling. I mean, we're almost 2 years into the Trump presidency. My goodness, if there was evidence of collusion, I think the country should see it. Unfortunately, now we've got a circumstance where so many Americans are in doubt, but fewer and fewer. Latest CBS poll shows more than half the country does not approve of how Robert Mueller is handling the investigation. More than half the country also believes that the Mueller investigation is politically motivated, not based on the facts.
We'll see what Mr. Mueller comes up with and how it was carried out. Good to see you, Congressman. Thank you very much.
You did a great job moderating that debate.
Thank you.
I think my man Ron DeSantis did a great job.
It was an interesting night. We'll see how it plays out. Good to see you, sir.
All right.
So up next, as more Democrats call to abolish ICE as the crisis at the border intensifies, questions are raised about a civil war brewing in the United States over the issues of borders and law enforcement. Jason Chaffetz and Juan Williams, they are up next live from Orlando.
ICE has strayed so far from its mission. It's supposed to be here to keep Americans safe, but what it's turned into is frankly a terrorist organization of its own.
Extremist Democrat politicians have called for the complete elimination of ICE. We don't want ICE anymore. You know what would happen to parts of our country? It would be overrun with the worst criminal elements you have ever seen.
So as the battle over immigration boils over in this country, the president is cautioning against a radical call from some who want ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency, to be abolished. Wisconsin Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan is now introducing a bill that would eliminate ICE, and a growing number of Democrats are pushing for that as well. Watch this.
I think we need to abolish ICE. That seems really clear. They have strayed so far from the interests of the American people and the interests of humanity.
We can enforce our immigration laws through another mechanism, not ICE, which is out of hand.
We can replace it, and we can replace it with a humane agency that is directed towards safe passage.
Joining me now, Jason Chaffetz, former House Oversight Committee chairman and a Fox News contributor, and Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and Fox News political analyst. Juan, let me begin with you. Do what they are saying, those Democrats on the campaign trail, does that resonate with you at all? Does it make any sense?
Oh, sure. I mean, you have a situation where, especially in the aftermath of the children being separated from their parents at the border, you know, there's a lot of concern over whether or not ICE's behavior has been too aggressive, and they're simply carrying out, without proper accountability and proper review of their actions, steps that in fact are anti-democratic, and whether they become more and more like just a, you know, unpoliced or unregulated agency of a government that's too big.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jason, what those who want to abolish ICE, what exactly they want to replace it with, because when you listen to the president on this, he talks about, you know, how his party, he believes, is the party of law and order, and he says Democrats just want open borders and an increase in crime, but they're really not making clear what they would replace it with or how they would fix it.
No, look, President Trump is absolutely right. All the problems, all the challenges in this world, from the opioid crisis to gangs, to all the problems that we're having in this country, and that's what the Democrats want to pick on, are the ICE officers that are going after the criminal element of those people that are here illegally. We got to have their back. And they conflate the difference between the Border Patrol and the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. I've been out on the streets with these guys. They do amazing work. They get the criminal element off their backs. And if the Democrats want to run on that platform as the differentiating factor going into 2018, they are going to lose, and lose by record numbers.
I mean, it's unmistakable that there is an energy in the country now that feels like almost like civil war. And in fact, some people are calling it that. Charlie Hurt wrote a piece saying that he believes that there's a civil war going on in this country when he looks at things such as the shooting of Congressman Scalise, the assassination of police officers in their vehicles, and the call to abolish ICE. He feels that this clash between those who want more security and those who don't is causing that kind of strife. Do you agree?
No, I mean, this is so interesting. I think that there's tremendous political polarization in the country, Martha. I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, there's going to be polarization over the next Supreme Court nominee coming from the Trump administration for just that reason. But when you're talking about immigration in specific, I think what you have is people who are, I think, pushing the fear button and using the issue to stir up anxiety, fear, in the country. I mean, recently we had a man who was a spokesman for ICE, say that he quit because there were just too many lies being told by Tom Homan and by Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. And you have, of course, the Oakland mayor who said she was going to try to alert people about the various ICE raids because, again, she saw it as intrusive and the government acting in a way that was promoting fear and anxiety in her population.
Let's play that. We have a soundbite from James Schwab, the former ICE spokesperson. We'll play that quickly and then get your response, Jason.
I could not fathom staying at an organization that was okay with lying to the American public. I hate that. In 17 years, in the military, at the Department of Defense as a civilian, at NASA, and now at Homeland Security, I have never been asked to lie. I have never been asked to perpetuate a lie, which is the same as lying.
Jason Chaffetz.
Hey, yeah, no, look, that's terribly concerning. I believe that gentleman also said that was happening in the Obama administration. And as the former chairman of the Oversight Committee, that's exactly the kind of person that we want to hear from. And understand his story, no matter who's in political office. But let's understand that the Democrats have embraced the principles of the resistance movement. It's violent, it's aggressive, it's in your face, it's a scorched earth philosophy. It puts people in harm's way, particularly law enforcement. I want law enforcement to know that the country has their back. Let's go after the criminals, the people that are creating crimes in this country, and make sure that they are out of this country. And if the Democrats fought as hard, think about how hard the Democrats fight to protect illegal aliens. It's unbelievable to me.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Good to see you both tonight. The conversation continues as the story goes on this evening. And this is a live look now at Annapolis, Maryland, where we are watching as police are getting ready to give us an update on the deadly shooting at the Capital Gazette newspaper today. We're going to bring you that live as soon as it happens. But first this evening, another conservative justice likely on the way. And Clinton critics now saying that the blame lies with Hillary Clinton and how she ran her campaign. Governor Mike Huckabee is here on that and what they're also saying about the evangelical vote. Next.